Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, the show where brilliant professionals share how to sharpen the universal skills required to flourish at work. Enjoy more career fun, wins, meaning, and money with your host, Pete Makaitis.
Hello, and thanks for joining us here for episode 567 with Kristin Neff. Kristin's got some pro tips on how you can achieve more with less criticism through what she calls self-compassion. So if you've been beating yourself up, if you're less productive now amidst the coronavirus or just all the time, she's got some great insights that I believe you will be enriched by, and you might have a much more pleasant experience inside your own head. You'll learn, one, why self-compassion is in fact a better motivator than criticism. Two, how to turn the compassion you have for others inward. And three, the value of your tone and touch within self-compassion. So if you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items we've referenced, you can expand that in your app player or visit awesomeatyourjob.com/ep. That's EP 567. Here's Kristin's story. Kristin Neff is a pioneer in the field of self-compassion research, creating a scale to measure the construct over 15 years ago. She's the author of the book Self-Compassion, The Power of Being Kind to Yourself. In conjunction with her colleague, Dr. Chris Germer, she has developed an empirically supported training program called Mindful Self-Compassion, which is taught by thousands of teachers worldwide. Kristin received her doctorate from the University of California at Berkeley, studying moral development, and she's currently an associate professor of educational psychology at the University of Texas at Austin. So big thanks to Kristin for sharing her insights with us, and big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is Harvard Business Review. This brilliant magazine, published at hbr.org, is the leading destination for smart management thinking. Fun fact, HBR has been mentioned in 108 episodes of the show. That's because HBR has great stuff that comes up often. They've got explainer videos, podcasts, real-world case studies, and much more. I think of HBR each night that I put on my special orange glasses. Their article, Will Blue Light Glasses Improve Your Sleep?, revealed that those who wore them reported better sleep and a 7% improvement in work performance as compared to those who wore the sham glasses. So I cite HBR anytime anyone tells me that I look silly wearing them. Now, much of HBR's content is available for free when you sign up at their site. Subscriptions that get you unlimited content cost $10 a month. If you visit hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME, you can save 10% off of that subscription. Again, to save 10% off of your HBR subscription, go to www.hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME. And big thanks to our sponsor, Acorns. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing for your future. You don't need a lot of money or expertise to invest with Acorns. In fact, you can get started with just your spare change. Acorns recommends an expert-built portfolio that fits you and your money goals, then automatically invests your money for you. NerdWallet.com, whom I love on these sorts of matters, gives Acorns a whopping 4.7 stars and says, quote, if you want to make the most of your spare change, there's no better place to do that than Acorns. Head to acorns.com/awesome or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. And we got a legal disclaimer here. It may not be representative of all clients. Tier 1 compensation provided. Compensation provides an incentive to positively promote Acorns. View important disclosures at acorns.com/awesome. Investing involves risk, including the loss of principal. Please consider your objectives, risk tolerance, and Acorns' fees before investing. Acorns Advisors LLC, Acorns, is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Brokerage services are provided to clients of Acorns by Acorns Securities LLC, member at FINRA/SIPC. For more information, visit acorns.com. Now, here's Kristin. Kristin, thanks for joining us here on the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast.
Oh, thanks, Pete. Glad to be here.
Well, we've got a lot of fun stuff to dig into, but one unique thing we learned about you in research is that you were featured in a documentary called Horseboy. What is this story all about?
Yeah, so it was a crazy adventure my family took with my son. So my son is autistic. And when he was very young, my ex-husband, his father, he had done a lot of work with human rights work with various indigenous peoples. And so we met some people like the Bushmen from the Kalahari, and we noticed that my son kind of seemed to get better when he was around shamans, and they kind of worked on him, and he really seemed to have an improvement in symptoms. And my son also learned to talk on horseback, on the back of a horse. Okay, well, where in the world combines horses with shamanism? And of course, the answer was Mongolia, because that's where the horse comes from, and shamanism is a natural religion. So he got this crazy idea, why don't we go to Mongolia and ride through the outer Mongolia visiting shamans on horseback and see what it does for our son. And so he talked me into it. And it was an amazing adventure. He actually did have a lot of improvements. Now, I don't know why, it may be just the family adventure in a really new context that led to the improvements, but the whole idea was, can autism be an adventure as opposed to a death sentence? So, and it really was an adventure. And I have to say, my son now, he's 18. It's just me and him now with this, closed down in the pandemic. He is the most amazing kid. He never complains. He is so sweet. He's so positive. He says things like, well, who knows, it may get better tomorrow. And, he cleans up after me in the kitchen. He's just such a wonderful soul. And part of me wonders, is that because when he was growing up, we never made his autism a pathology. We always just considered it a gift. And, he's doing amazing. So that's my other life.
Well, that's great to hear. And thanks for sharing that. And a good perspective, I think, here, when your other life is as an expert on self-compassion, you sort of own that phrase or hyphenated word combo. So what does that mean exactly, and how is that helpful?
So self-compassion is really just using this experience we have all the time of compassion for others, especially people we care about, and doing a little U-turn so we give ourselves compassion. So it's just treating yourself with kindness, support, care, concern, just like you would naturally do for others.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a good thing to do. Tell us, what is that in contrast to? If people are not self-compassionate, what are we?
Yeah. So, a lot of people are confused about self-compassion. They think, it's self-pity, or that it's the same as self-esteem, or that it's self-indulgent. It's really none of those things. And there's actually research to show that. It's just simply a way of relating to yourself with kindness, care, and support. Now, most people actually, we show in my research, tend to be pretty self-critical. Right? Most people, if you ask them, who are you more compassionate to, others or yourself? Vast majority are more compassionate to others than themselves. So really self-compassion is a way of correcting that imbalance. Instead of shaming ourselves because we aren't perfect, or just feeling so isolated because, our life isn't going the way we want it to, as if life's supposed to go exactly the way we want it to. We just kind of embrace our imperfection. We realize this is part of the shared human experience, and we support ourselves through.
Okay. So can you give us some maybe real world examples in terms of when we're speaking to ourselves in a self-critical way versus a self-compassionate way? And we'll start with that. And I've got much more to dig into from there.
Yeah. So, motivation is a really good context to see the difference between self-criticism and self-compassion, because most people very naturally think that self-criticism is an effective motivator, and the thing is, it kind of is. It's kind of like a steam engine that burns coal. It'll get you up the hill, but it spits out a lot of smoke, right? So, self-criticism, although it can motivate us, it has unintended effects like, we develop performance anxiety, because if I don't do as well as I'd like to, I'm going to beat myself up. We often develop fear of failure, which can lead to things like procrastination, right? Oftentimes when we fail, we just give up because we can't handle risking our sense of self again by trying. So self-compassion, on the other hand, it's also very strongly linked to motivation and more effective motivation than self-criticism. So we try not because we're unacceptable as we are, but simply because we care about ourselves. We want to achieve our best. And so with that sense of unconditional safety, in other words, the bottom line is, if you fail, you're still going to be okay. I will still love myself, but I will try again because I care and I want to do better. And so people are less likely to procrastinate. They're less likely to develop anxiety. They actually perform better for that reason. They don't give up as easily. They have more grit. So again, there's a ton of research on this showing that it's a better motivator than self-criticism.
Oh, now those are some nice benefits. So more motivation, less procrastination, more grit. I think you said less anxiety.
Yes, absolutely. Less anxiety, less depression.
Well, could you share, I love me some research and some data and some numbers. What is perhaps one of the most striking in terms of, those are really impressive results and numbers there. kind of study or research do you think folks who want to be awesome at their jobs would be impressed to hear about?
Well, so here's something pretty remarkable. Some people think that self-compassion is weak. Self-compassion, when the going gets tough, is a remarkable source of resilience. So I'll just give you an example of a study looking at combat veterans who had come back from Iraq or Afghanistan. And so they measured their self-compassion level, these veterans, and they followed the veterans up for 9 months. And they found that self-compassion, those soldiers with higher self-compassion were much less likely to develop post-traumatic stress disorder. But even here's the kicker. Self-compassion level was even a stronger predictor than how much action they had seen. So in other words, in terms of how traumatized you are, more important than like how much action you saw, how much, gore or violence you experience, more important than that in terms of how traumatized you are is how did you relate to yourself in the midst of that trauma?
Yeah.
Were you an ally? Did you have your own back? Did you support yourself? Were you kind? Or did you tear yourself down? I mean, for instance, the issue of shame, a lot of veterans, combat soldiers have a lot of feelings of, shame, like maybe what they're doing is wrong, and they tear themselves down and they criticize themselves. And there's also a huge problem with attempted suicide among the veterans, but not those who have self-compassion. If you teach vets to have self-compassion, they're much less likely to try to commit suicide. So those are the type of really strong findings we get, really showing how strong it makes you. It makes you very strong.
Oh, that's excellent. So then with motivation, can you share one of those studies?
Yeah, I can. Okay, so there's a great study by two women named Serena Chen and Juliana Breenes at UC Berkeley, my alma mater in California. And so what they did is they had a group of undergraduates in their study, and they gave them a very hard vocabulary test that everyone failed. Okay, and so they split these subjects, these undergraduates, into 3 groups. One group, they helped to be self-compassionate. Don't beat yourself up about it. Everyone fails. It's okay. It's only human, right? So just kind of be kind to yourself. Another group, they didn't say anything. They were just a neutral control. But a third group, they said, hey, don't worry about it. You must be smart. You got into Berkeley, for goodness sakes, right? So the self-esteem boost condition. And then the next step of the study was they gave students a second test. And they said, okay, well, here's the second test. You can study as long as you want for this second vocabulary test. And what they found was that the students who were told to be self-compassionate, they studied more, they studied longer, and they actually performed better on the test. Mm-hmm. So this kind of shows you, we talk so much about self-esteem, about, self-confidence. It's actually much more important just to be kind and supportive to yourself.
So let's zoom right into that example in terms of, okay, here I am. I took a test and it didn't go awesomely. And I've got an opportunity to take another. And I am following self-compassion approaches. What would I say and or do to myself?
Well, so first of all, what self-compassion does is it makes it okay to fail. And more than that, it helps us recognize that we learn from failure, right? So self-compassion allows us to have what they call learning goals as opposed to performance goals. I want to do well so I can learn and grow as opposed to because I need other people to like me. Mm-hmm. Because when you have self-compassion, you don't need other people to like you. Your sense of self-worth isn't contingent on other people approving of you, or you getting the grade you want, or the job performance evaluations you want, right? And so people might think, well, if I don't care about my job performance evaluations, then how am I going to, why should I even keep trying? The thing is, you do still care about getting positive evaluations, but your self-worth isn't contingent on it. So if you get a poor evaluation or you fail a test, the idea is you can say to yourself, oh, well, first of all, hey, that hurt, kind of validating the fact that it hurts. That hurt. But, it's okay. Everyone fails. Everyone's imperfect. What can I learn from this situation? How can I grow from this? And then that orientation towards learning and growth because you want to do better, not because you have to be better to be a good enough person, but just because you want to do better because you care. That's actually the engine that drives you to do better. And it's more sustainable and it's more effective.
Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. Well, so I don't want to make this all about the coronavirus, but, it's top of mind
Sure,
for a lot of folks. And I think that's kind of part of the context of why we thought your stuff would be just right for us right now.
Yeah.
So it was funny just today as I was prepping, I read this Onion headline, which just cracks me up. The parody newspaper there. It says, man not sure why he thought most psychologically taxing situation of his life would be the thing to make him productive. And,
Right.
and then toward the end it says, I thought I'd have all this energy and space to focus on my creative side, but I guess living with ever-present, crushing uncertainty and the knowledge that people all around me are dying wasn't the stimulus I needed after all.
Yeah.
And so we had another guest, Liz Fossline, who shared a lovely graphic on LinkedIn about productivity, like how productive am I normally? How productive am I during an unprecedented global pandemic? Yet the bar chart is way shorter, like a fifth. And so I think that this is a common experience. I'm feeling it, and others are as well, that, here I have, in some ways, fewer obligations upon me.
Mm-hmm.
This varies wildly person to person, but some people might like, when plans get canceled, you're like, oh, hey, I guess I'm freed up. Well, in a way, a lot of things have been canceled.
Yeah.
Yet, even those of us who are healthy and not tending to someone in a tough spot, physically, medically.
Or parents watching their kids. Yeah.
Certainly, yeah. Can find ourselves with a malaise, a reduction of energy, productivity, etc., and can be hard on themselves as a result. Like, come on, man. Where's the juice? Where's all the stuff you were crushing before? It's uncrushed.
Yeah.
Can you comment on how do we deal with this in a self-compassionate way and what results might flow from that?
Yeah, so it's really important. I've actually done several programs helping people use self-compassion to deal with the anxiety about the pandemic. So self-compassion actually has three main components. The first is mindfulness. In other words, we have to be willing to check in with ourselves. How am I feeling? I think what's happening for a lot of people is they're just, they're making sure they have enough groceries. They're kind of getting through each day. They're making sure they're wearing their masks. They're really focused on keeping themselves safe, but they haven't paused to say, hey, this is really hard. I'm really fearful, or maybe I'm grieving, or I feel really stressed, or I feel lonely, whatever it is you're feeling. We kind of don't do that U-turn to say, well, I'm having a really hard time right now. And you actually need to be mindful first in order to give yourself compassion. And then maybe toward their friends they're being, supportive, or maybe to your elderly parents you're being supportive. But often we forget to be supportive with ourselves. I mean, if ever there was a time where we need emotional support, where we need kindness, it's right now. So again, and that may be in the form of warm language with ourselves, a warm tone of voice, kind of reminding ourselves that, we have our own backs, that we won't abandon ourselves, that, we're here. And that's especially important because most of us feel really isolated, right? One of the real benefits of self-compassion, again, is it connects to other people, it connects to humanity. So the difference between self-pity and self-compassion, self-pity is woe is me. Self-compassion is, life is hard for everyone. Everyone's imperfect. Everyone struggles, right? So it's a much more unbalanced state of mind. And so sometimes, we're feeling lonely because we're all alone in our house, perhaps. But then it's very easy nowadays to remember, hey, it's not just me. It's actually 2 billion other people, maybe 3 billion at this point, who are also struggling with the same situation. So even though physically we may be alone, emotionally, as long as we remember that it's not just me, we can actually feel more connected. And so just going through these three little steps, being mindful of your pain, being kind to yourself because it's hard, and just remembering that you aren't alone. This is bigger than you.
Mm-hmm. All right, that is great. And I'd love it when you talk about sort of the internal mental self-talk stuff. Mm-hmm. Are there any really just like go-to, mantras, scripts, phrases that you love, or you found people you work with love, in terms of like breaking the pattern of, you're so stupid, why did you do that? And to quickly kind of regain control and put it on a better path?
Yes, so everyone uses different language. And really the easiest way to find the language that works for you is to think, what if I had a really loved close friend who was going through the exact same situation I'm going through? And actually in this case, you probably do. Mm-hmm. How would I talk to them, right? So me, I tend to be a little more I don't know, mushy, I guess you would call it. So I call myself sweetheart and darling, and my tone of voice is almost like a mother. I also have an autistic child, so I'm very used to using that warm motherly tone. But for many people, that tone would make them gag, right? Mm-hmm. Some people it may be, hey, buck up, it's going to be okay. But there's a difference between buck up, it's going to be okay, which is like, you should be better, and hey, buck up, it's going to be okay.
Yeah, like, so the tone of the voice inside your head matters.
The tone of voice matters a lot.
All right.
And not only tone of voice, but touch. So the first 2 years of life, we don't have language, right? We can't really communicate with our parents. So the two main ways we communicate with parents, that they communicate care to us, is touch and tone of voice. And so what we know is that warm tone of voice and soothing or supportive touch actually activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which means it calms us down, it makes us feel supported, it makes us feel safe. So you can, put your hands on your heart or on your stomach or on your face, as long as you've washed your hands, or a hug or something like that. Some sort of physical gesture that makes you feel safe and supported. And even if it seems a little odd at first, and, I'll admit it does seem odd at first, your body doesn't really know the difference, right? So it's not that your body doesn't know the difference between self and other, but your body reacts the same way when you give yourself supportive touch as when you give it to others, right? And then again, if you use a warm tone, that's another way that your body just kind of naturally says, oh, okay, I can relax, it's safe. Mm-hmm. So really just say, what would I say to a dear friend, and try that out. And that's probably your best bet for language.
Well, yeah, and it's funny. There are so many different kinds of touch. And right now, I don't know. Sometimes in these interviews, I often go to humor, like The Onion, or now I'm thinking about a Key and Peele sketch where there's football players really into patting people's butts. But that might be it for you if you had an athletic career. Or I've got one of those little head scratcher thingies, those wires. Yeah. I think those feel awesome in terms of like
head scratcher or kind of fist bump on the chest or something like that. Absolutely.
That's good. Okay, well, so I want to make sure we also hit the notion of, for the gunners, the achievers, who are all about, having high standards, high expectations, demanding excellence. How do these things square and work together?
Yeah, so the research shows that self-compassionate people, their standards are just as high as everyone else's. Because high standards comes from wanting to reach your full potential, wanting to be happy, wanting to, do your best. The huge difference is what happens when you don't meet your standards, right? Because we're human beings. Sometimes we reach our standards, sometimes we don't. And so if you're very self-critical, when you fall short of your standards, you may be like, that's not acceptable. You have to do better, or else. Like the thread is kind of like, or else I won't love you, or else I'll say mean things to you, or else I'll hate you. We say this to ourselves. And again, that actually undermines our ability to do our best because it creates a sense of anxiety, right? So in other words, the drive to achieve doesn't come from the self-criticism. The drive to achieve comes from the fact that we want to do our best. And so when we stumble, which by the way, I'm sure you've had a ton of people on the show saying, of course we learn from our failures. That's the best way we learn. So when we're kind and supportive to ourselves, we remember that, and when we fail, we pick ourselves up and try again. Now, having said this, sometimes the right response is to give up, right? Sometimes we're barking up the wrong tree. Sometimes it's good to change careers, for instance, if it's just really not working out for you. That's a matter of wisdom. You don't want to be stupid with this and say, I've got to achieve every single goal I've set out for myself. We need wisdom to say, hey, that's an achievable goal. Or, maybe another goal would be better for you. And so with wisdom and kindness and encouragement, it works. So I'll give you an example. My son, he was actually homeschooled for most of his life. And I finally put him into public school, and, his testing was kind of like treasure hunts. It wasn't standard testing. So the first test he had, world geography test, he came home, he got an F. Just like flat F. And so I could have tried to motivate him with the way we often motivate ourselves, which is, you stupid loser, you'll never amount to anything. And if you think about this, what would the effect of that be on him? Is that going to make him say, yes, I can do it? Of course not. That's going to make them feel shame and want to give up, and the same thing with ourselves. Often really harsh language makes us feel shame, and shame is not exactly a get up and go mind state. So what I did is, first of all, I gave him a hug. Hey, it's okay. Everyone fails. It's just part of the learning process. But did I leave it there? Of course not. I care about my son. I don't want him to fail his class. So I called all his teachers and I figured out what was going on. And we realized there were some study methods that weren't working for him. So we changed his study methods. We also changed the way he took his tests. And now he's doing great. And so that's what compassion gives you. It's like, bottom line, it's okay to fail. I'm still love myself. It's unconditional. And yet, because I care, I want to do my best. So I'm going to use my wisdom to figure out how to do my best, right? So it's not like if I don't do I have to do my best or else. It's, I really want you to do your best. How can I help? And that supportive attitude is actually much more effective.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think I'm picking up what you're putting down there in terms of, and I think the tone is really interesting in terms of, even though the voice inside your head is not audible, it has a tone.
Yeah, well, but the self-critic does, doesn't it? I mean, some people say, oh, it seems so strange to talk to myself. But it doesn't seem strange when you beat yourself up, does it? It's just that we're used to that voice, so we don't even notice it, but it's going on in our head all the time. So we're just learning to have a second voice. And by the way, the self-critic, it's not like we want to get rid of it. Often our self-critical thoughts, point out places where we're going wrong. It's just ways that we're trying to actually help ourselves do better. It's just not that effective. So we can say to our inner critic, oh, thank you for trying to help me. Got it. I hear you. And now how am I going to go about achieving that goal in a way that's actually a little more conducive to success?
Mm-hmm. Well, Kristin, tell me anything else you want to make sure to mention regarding self-compassion and related subjects for those wanting to be awesome at their jobs.
Right. So, just for instance, one of the things we know is that self-compassion enhances creativity. So if you want to be awesome at your job, it's important that you're creative. But if you beat yourself up all the time, what we know is that negative mind state actually gets in the way of being creative and thinking out of the box. But again, when the bottom line is I'm safe, I care about myself, and if I were to fail, it's okay, that sense of safety gives you more freedom to think out of the box and think creatively. So it's really useful in all sorts of ways, on the job, off the job, really anytime you might experience challenge. All
right, lovely. Well, now could you share with us a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
Okay. Well, there's a quote from Helen Keller that I love, and she says, when one door of happiness closes, another usually opens. But we usually spend so long staring at the closed door, we don't even see the one that has been opened for us.
Thank you.
And so self-compassion, that's why we're more optimistic, because we don't just stare at the closed door. We kind of feel safe, and then we can look around and say, what other opportunities are here for me?
Yeah, well, and I think that's excellent in the coronavirus context, because It's true. Some doors have closed, and it sucks.
It sucks. It does suck.
And some other doors have opened.
That's right.
And so you got to make sure you're being fully aware and honest and making some prudent calls about where you're pointing that attention. So right. Thank you.
But on the other hand, it's important also to give yourself compassion for the fact that it does suck.
Yeah.
We don't have to be chipper and positive. We can take some time to say, this is just really, really hard. This sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And then that will actually help us get through it.
Oh, thank you. And how about a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
So here's one. Very simple. In terms of the fact that you really can change your self-compassion level. So one study had people write a self-compassionate letter to themselves, which is just basically using mindfulness and kindness and reminding themselves of their humanity, a letter for 7 days straight. And they found that just that simple act of writing a self-compassionate letter decreased depression for 3 months and increased happiness for 6 months. So it had really long-term effects, a very simple practice like this. So this is something you can, fold into your everyday life. You don't have to actually write a letter, just remembering, these 3 components, just remembering mindfulness, common humanity, and kindness can make a huge difference in your life.
Mm-hmm. And how about a favorite book?
A favorite book. Well, I'm going to pick a book called Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. She's one of my favorite teachers. She's actually a Buddhist meditation teacher. And it's just a beautiful book talking about, what happens, the transformation that happens when we just radically accept ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And how about a favorite tool, something you use to be awesome at your job?
SPSS, which is a statistical program.
I've used it before.
Have you?
Man, memories, select cases.
That's right. Yeah, so you can calculate your p-values, and p-value doesn't mean urine; it means like probability values.
I was always terrified. I clicked one setting a little bit off; it would ruin everything.
Yeah.
And how about a favorite habit? Something you do that helps you be awesome at your job?
Well, I do yoga. I do Ashtanga yoga. So I do that 3 times a week. And I find when I do that, it just really helps helps me have some of my energy out in a more productive way and keeps me flexible. And so I think that helps me, even though I sit in my chair all day for my job, I think it helps that I get out of the chair at least 3 times a week to do some Ashtanga yoga.
We had a previous guest say Ashtanga yoga was amazing for making bodily pain disappear. Has that been your experience?
Well, it's funny. I'm 53 and my body's in pretty good shape and I don't have a lot of chronic pain. So I don't know if that's just good genes or what, but it's worked out for me. Yeah.
All right.
And it also makes you strong.
Cool.
Which is nice.
And is there a particular nugget you share that really seems to connect and resonate and get repeated back to you frequently?
So one of the nuggets I like to share, actually along with my colleague Chris Germer, we developed something called the Mindful Self-Compassion Program. But the nugget is the goal of practice, whatever practice, meditation practice or just life practice, the goal of practice is simply to become a compassionate mess. Right? Can you imagine if that's your goal? That you don't have to not be a mess. Your goal is just to be a compassionate mess. Well, that's an achievable goal, right? And so that if you start framing things that way, you realize, okay, well, maybe my goal should be more about compassion than about getting everything perfect or right.
Mm-hmm. And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
Well, just Google self-compassion. Like I said, I got in early. So if you Google self-compassion, you can spell it any way you want to. You'll find my website. And I have research on there, hundreds of articles. You can test your own self-compassion level with my scale I developed. You can practice exercises. There's videos. So it's really a one-stop shopping resource for self-compassion, and it's all free. So.
Mm-hmm. And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
Yes. So really, I think it is around motivation, right? So the next time you have a big work task, a big work challenge, just really pause and say, how can I encourage and support myself to get this done? Especially if your habitual way of encouraging yourself is using the whip approach. See if you can change from the whip to support. Try it out and just see what happens.
Oh, that is lovely. And could you give us just a couple examples? How could I support and challenge myself? Part of what I'm thinking is I will decide a celebration, after this is done, or I will break this task into a dozen tiny tasks so they feel more manageable and just be like, okay, I can pull up that email. I can identify the 3 deliverables,
right,
and so forth. So anyway, those are my examples. What else do you see works?
Yeah. So a lot of strategies are kind of more concrete strategies, which are really great and really important in terms of actually how to do your work more effectively. But don't underestimate your emotional state of mind and how that affects your ability to do your best, right? So if you're really tense and you're kind of really like, oh, I got to get this right, that tension, that anxiety is actually going to undermine your ability to do your best. But if your attitude is, hey, I got your back. I know you can do it, but if you make a mistake, that's okay. That's how you're going to learn. And that's really kind of the self-compassionate mind state. How can I learn from my mistakes? And then if you try that, it actually will help you be less anxious and you'll actually be less likely to make mistakes. But if you do, you'll be more likely to pick yourself up and try again. So it's really more how you relate to what you're doing as opposed to what you're doing.
Beautiful. Well, Kristin, thank you. This has been a treat. I wish you lots of luck in all your adventures and much kindness to yourself.
Thank you, Pete. Be well and be safe.
I really appreciated Kristin's take on the mental tone. So I know that I talk to myself. I can sort of hear in my mind's ear, if you will, words. It's sort of funny. I'm not a crazy person. I've learned that this is everybody's experience. Although I think it's funny, I talk to myself with I and you and we. The pronouns are, which I think is interesting. Like, what are you going to do? I don't know. Well, we got to do something. I love there's I, you, and we. So I haven't disaggregated them into characters. But anyway, so we all have this voice inside our head. But to really take a moment and think about not just the word choice you're using. Like, you idiot, what were you thinking? Well, clearly, okay. Something to watch out for. But even more subtly, just to watch the tone. You could say, what were you thinking in your mind's ear in a really harsh, judgmental, critical way, or in sort of fun, relaxed, I guess easygoing, like whoopsie-daisy kind of way. For example, what was I thinking? Versus, whoa, what was I thinking? You get the idea. A nice little subtlety, which I think can make a world of difference. This reminds me of the Charlie Harari episode about resilience and how you think. Great stuff there too. And I hope it makes an impact for you. Again, the show notes, the transcript, the links to ads we've referenced are at awesomeatyourjob.com/ep567. If you haven't already, I hope you push subscribe to catch our next guest, Laura Stack. She is talking about productivity, and she has some perspectives on what we do, the alternative means of prioritizing that don't serve us well, which I thought was very insightful. So I think you'll enjoy that. Hope to catch you there, and peace.
Thanks for listening. To get the most out of the show, we recommend 2 key things. First, check out the extra resources at awesomeatyourjob.com. You can find this episode's transcript and links, as well as the perfect episode for your situation. You can search the full text transcripts of hundreds of episodes or explore episodes tagged by topic and competency covered. Second, subscribe to the podcast and get future episodes automatically. You can subscribe by telling Siri and several other smartphones and speakers, subscribe to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, or by tapping subscribe in your podcast player of choice. If you'd like some extra help figuring out podcasts and how subscriptions work, visit awesomeatyourjob.com/subscribe for guidance. Hope to catch you on the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.